I guess I'll add this last one. I didn't want to end the videos with, even though this is just as good. Let me try to do something for my conservative or my Democratic friends. This is the Kohler Times, which is part of the USA Network. So this is like the USA Today, which I like to read. It's going to look backwards, I guess. Debate. This is top story now. The top headline on the section of the USA Today part of our Kohler Times. Debate about Trump's mental health grows. Behavior worries analysts. And then you have the James Clapper, which I commented on. And it's funny because Trump tweeted he's a liar. Let me say what James Clapper did do before Trump ever got in. What James Clapper did, he could have been, because he lied to Congress about collection of data by Americans, which was the National Security Agency, the NSA, and he did indeed lie. And you know, if that was somebody that was considered, I believe Clapper was a holdover actually from a Republican, but that was under Obama administration. But what Clapper did, there was more on what Clapper did there for him to have faced charges by the Justice Department than everything that Trump has done in the so-called collusion and everything else with Russia and going at. There was more because he lied to Congress and then admitted he lied. Now, underneath the debate about Trump's mental health, the Navy removes the head of the 7th Fleet. See a crisis. All these ships getting hit. And then the quote. Now this is the front page of the USA part, if you could see it. Another top news story is a quote by Clinton from her new book. And the quote that made top news is, "My skin crawled as Trump hovered over me." And look, if you want to write a book, Hillary Clinton wrote a book, and these are excerpts. But they played her, I hope I made that clear yesterday, while I was typing the notes on the Evening Post. You heard in her own words, because I guess she has, done the audio for the book, but they played on the world news, "Back up, you creep." The voice of Hillary made it to the world news on audio saying to Trump, "Back up, you creep," after the world news also did a few other things. They questioned the stability of Trump because the Phoenix speech, was it in Phoenix? It was a campaign rally style speech. And they said it was so erratic and so, okay. And for my liberal friends, you say, but if Hillary really believed and felt like Trump made her skin crawl, but that's not a front page news story. There are many critics of Obama that you could have found that did indeed say very many critical things. But would you run whatever book that was written from any critic of President Obama, and would that be run on the world news and shown as a top news story? And there were legitimate critics of Obama, and then there were ones that just... So this is what we mean when we say media manipulation of false news. It's you giving that whole front page, I just got to it, that's what you see. There's a debate about his mental health. Then there's such a rash of Navy ships getting, which I've commented on, Singapore vessels hitting them. And then the third top news story on that page, Trump makes my skin crawl. All right, now, where are we at on the hurricane thing now? I have no problem staying here. I'm very close to the water, so what I suggested was I would prefer if my wife and kids either went to my daughter Bethany, which is not as close to the water as I am, because we're going to get a storm surge, or even to Mathis or Sandia. They've made it mandatory evacuation, but the flooding that you're going to get, winds are going to be pretty good, pretty strong, but the flooding the winds now are estimated to be like 125. That's big winds. There's going to be damage. But the biggest projected damage is going to be from flooding and storm surge, because the way Harvey is projected to go is it's going to come inland and it's going to hover here for a while. So you're going to have water like that. So I don't make light of the damage, but nor do I make light of the reality of things that I see a lot of people in our media right now scared. They, some of them are maybe should be less. But when people are fear of there's danger of physical harm and danger of death, people then and Channel 3 News, KIII, they're doing they got rid of a lot of the entertainment format throughout the day, and then they decided to do live coverage, which is good. A lot of times when I'm trying to doing some work around here, if I click to my news channels on the radio, which I listen to as I'm working around here, if all it is a lot of times on Saturday, a lot of times it's just entertainment, or it's things that absolutely make no difference at all, and it upsets me. But now people are serious, like issues. If I were to comment on some of our things that we have going on in the world today, and North Korea. Why is North Korea the way they are? They are of course they're isolated, and we get that, and they have like a cult worship of their leader. And we had a war with Korea. My father was in the Korean War. My dad was in the Korean War. Do you know Korea and North Korea, they were bombed, and that country was indeed decimated. I mean, we didn't nuke them, and that happened. Now you say yes, but that was the past. There's people living today that saw some of that when they were young kids, that are still there, older generation, obviously. So that's, you grow up in a place that says there's another country in the world that does war games off our coast regularly, yearly, annually, and you could say that there's reasons why people live in fear. And any assurances, I'm not for North Korea developing nuclear weapons. But what's our track record? We tried to say to North Korea through China, because we don't have open negotiations. We've never fully, the war was not, we're just like maybe we call it an armistice, or I forget what the word is. So the war didn't officially end with North Korea, which makes it easier for President Trump, if he ever said we're going to do an action there, he doesn't even have to use the old justification for all these other wars that even Obama used, which was what we gave George Bush after 9/11, which is now, I think they've finally, Congress rescinded that, or wants to. So, North Korea, they're building nuclear weapons, and they believe that that's really a safety for them, because their history is there's another country that might wipe us out. And if we give assurances to a country, if we said, but if they just understood, John, look, I want them to understand. But if they say, if we just assure them, look, we want you to get rid of those weapons because they are somewhat of a threat to us in the U.S. And if you don't get rid of them, we might do something. The history, though, of the world is we're the only ones that ever did nuclear strikes twice. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the history of the world is we're the only ones that did that. And some others in other countries think you say there's a threat because you in the West have done this once. And you're assuring us you don't want us to have them, but other countries have them. These are other views that people around the world hold. And then you tell us, unless we just get rid of our nuclear weapons, stop trying to develop them, everything would be okay if you stopped that. But that's not our history. I'm looking at my map. Where's Libya? I could find it for you. It's right here somewhere. Okay? So It's on this coast of Africa. A lot of people don't know that. So you got Egypt here, and look, Libya is going to be right in here. I'm not sure if it's showing it, but Libya's right there. Right where I was pointing. And our history with that country was basically after the 9/11 and our response to 9/11. Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, he was the only country, not an ally, who said, I'm going to give up nukes and the desire to develop nukes. I'm going to do it voluntarily. He did that. Muammar Gaddafi did that. North Korea, Kim Jong-un, they didn't do it voluntarily. But Gaddafi did it. And a few years later, we backed up his murder, you see. And that country, Libya, they're right on that area of Africa, which I just showed you. They are now a stronghold for terrorist groups, and it's never had the same stability that it had before we backed up the assassination and murder of Gaddafi. That the U.S. did that, President Obama did that. Okay. So, what does it tell these other countries? Well, all we are asking is get rid of a certain thing. There's no assurances when our media says, oh, but the president, he's so deranged, he might, and that's what the article said, he might just, the drop of a bucket or whatever, blow you up. Okay, let me get the psalm in. Look, these psalms I read in order, meaning as I'm reading through these other Bible books that I'm teaching on, I don't want to go too. And then when you come across a certain psalm, when you read it in order, there are some that are tough psalms. We call them imprecatory psalms. Okay? Meaning David himself is speaking prophetically, and he's calling down judgment. And a lot of scholars have a difficult time with the imprecatory psalms. And when they come up, oftentimes when I read them, I say, I would never pray that, because some are that tough. And when I read this psalm last night, or this morning, but then the companion reading, I happen to have read James, one of the chapters in James. And James, it talks about not judging. It talks about, but yet this psalm, how could it almost seem to be a contradiction? Because when David is speaking by the Spirit, it's not the intent of a man. When David was prophesying, or when prophets are prophesying, whether in Scripture or in society, it's God's Spirit prophesying. That's how David, quote, got away with the imprecatory psalms, because it wasn't him speaking. I've got one verse about David written up here on one of the little things I made on my last trip. For this is all my salvation, all my desire, seek ye the Lord. As for me, this is my covenant. I think it's this one I wanted to read. Although my house be not so with God, yet hath he made with me an everlasting covenant, ordered on all things and sure. For this is all my desire and all my salvation. And I think if you go through the rest of that, that's from Samuel. It says, the Most High spake through me. That's why I'm thinking of that. So David said, that was God spoke through me, David said. And that was a delight to King David. And so I read this psalm last, Psalms 56. Be merciful unto me, O God, for man would swallow me up. He fighting daily oppresseth me. Mine enemies would daily swallow me up, for they be many that fight against me, O thou Most High. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. In God I will praise his word. In God I put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me. Every day they wrest my words, twist my words. All their thoughts are against me for evil. They gather themselves together, they hide themselves. Mark my steps. Shall they escape by iniquity? In thine anger cast down the people, O God. Thou tellest my wanderings, you put my tears into a bottle. When I cry unto thee, then shall my enemies turn back. This I know, God is for me. In God I will praise his word. In God have I put my trust. Your vows are upon me. Thou hast delivered my soul from death. David says, in anger cast down thy people. The one before that has almost the same sense. Now, all of this talk about people when they themselves, why North Korea? Where are some people who live under a certain fear of physical harm or death? If that fear comes from a natural, what we refer to as a natural disaster, it's still there. You see it everywhere. You see people worry about the ultimate thing. It's possible I might die. It's possible that, and some will die, obviously. This is a big storm. How many? Who knows? I do not know. But say if that fear of death hangs over you because of a fear of another country, or that fear, okay, you see what I'm saying? Say if that fear, you're living in it. One of the news articles was in Yemen, the Saudi coalition, which are the airplanes of Saudi Arabia, who are backed by the United States. We are behind Saudi Arabia. They're an ally. They just bombed, I read it just before I turned on, they just bombed a hotel, and there were 41 people, just civilians, that were killed in that air raid, which we're backing in Yemen. But that's not looked upon. If you have a few people that die by a vehicle crash, and it's one of the ISIS things, rightfully it makes news. This is a bad and wrong thing. But when you have a country that we're backing up, who just bombed a hotel in Yemen and 40-something civilians were killed, and made a very small thing. So people do live under fear. They live under fear of what other countries might do, what other countries politically would back up. Now, times of judgment. There's a lot of reporting on all the media things. And really, if I didn't have, like, my family, I would wish they were inland more, okay? But I'm going to make as many videos during the storm without, I got a few backup phones that are not in service, but I could still video from. So I hope to make a few of those. I might not be able to upload them all if the internet's out. I bought that little thing, the converter, that I could charge phones from the car battery. And when the car battery gets low, you just start the car, recharge your battery. And then you can use that little thing in case we lose power for some days. So I'll end with that one. I'll post that song. And we pray. We don't just pray for, many in the media, many in the community now locally, send support and help. And all of that is good. And all of that is good. But one of the things that also has disturbed me as I watch local media, sometimes they'll report on things that, wow, something happened that was really bad. And they'll report on it, but because everybody has a routine, then it just kind of passes by. And maybe something that was bad done and locally. Maybe something that was done in a corruption thing or something. That even others said, oh yes, you did a very wrong thing, Corpus Christi. And everybody just we're just going to keep going. And times of judgment are when God says, no, you're not going to just keep going. There are issues that come to light. And God says, when you have that fear in you, because you are maybe in somewhat of a danger, a threat, which all of us are now, living on this coast here. Of course we pray for the protection of people. But people think so differently when it's coming upon them. They think so differently. Many people couldn't care less that 41 innocent people were just bombed in Yemen and killed. Kids too. I didn't read the whole article. This is almost like they have even though that would have never happened without our backing. Without the United States backing of Saudi Arabia, that would have never happened. But people wouldn't even, they're too busy either with an entertainment, no. But then if you knew, oh, it's possible tonight 41 of you might die from a hurricane, or 41 of you might die, then everybody would be, because of the seriousness of life and death. So all of these things, I think, are for a sign, okay? I'll post, this will be the last one, and then hopefully the next few days I'll get some videos up. God bless everybody.